Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the New Year's special, Eve of the Daleks, written by Chris Chibnall and is directed by Andrea Lofter. This is the follow-up to the storyline that was introduced in Flux, in which the TARDIS has been disintegrating from the inside. Due to maybe the Doctor's recklessness, or maybe just some other storyline that hasn't been resolved yet in terms of the story. I don't know, as the time as I'm recording this, Power of the Doctor hasn't come out yet, so we don't actually know what's happening. But anyway, so Eve of the Daleks is a follow-up to that storyline. It's also the third Dalek story in the Jodie Whittaker series, though the Daleks have appeared in Flux. Did they appear in Timeless Child? I can't remember. I don't think so. So this is like the third main story, basically setting up a sort of small trilogy of stories with Revolution of the Daleks, and Eve of the Daleks. I wish they kept it like R of the Daleks, but that's beside the point. This story also tackles a very popular trend in sci-fi. This is a Groundhog Day story. A story in which a group of characters are trapped in a time loop and they repeat the same time, the same moments over and over again until they learn their lesson, or maybe they just don't. But it's a popular trend in science fiction, the Groundhog Day storyline. So this is Doctor Who with Daleks doing Groundhog's Day, which, for those of you who don't know, the term actually comes from the Bill Murray classic film Groundhog Day, in which the character of that film, he's stuck in Groundhog's Day for all eternity. So, yeah. This story also stars the comedians Ashlyn Beer as Sarah and Ajani Salman as Nick. And they're the only two guest stars. This story was filmed during the pandemic, during COVID, and as such, they weren't allowed a massive, extensive cast in fear of spreading the disease. So instead, they had only 2 extra characters, if you're not counting the Daleks themselves. So that's really cool stuff. That is really cool. So let's get on to the essential premise of the story. We are at Elfman's storage unit, a place, it's a storage unit where Sarah, like I said, played by Ashlyn Peter, she works there, and every year on New Year's Day, she basically gets trapped there by her boss. Her boss, who I think she's related, if I remember correctly, or at least her uncle used to own the business before he passed away, and she basically, every year, he always bails out on her so that she has to basically work on New Year's Eve. At the same time, Nick seems to always appear on New Year's Eve to store something. And when he goes in, he has this very strange aesthetic about him. He tries to talk to her, but clearly he's a bit awkward. He's a bit shy, and he tells jokes that aren't that funny. At least not that funny to Sarah. And then they go down, and he goes down where he is suddenly shot by a Dalek. Then we get introduced to the Doctor, Yaz and Dan, played by John Bishop, Mandip Gill, and Jodie Whittaker, who are trying to fix the TARDIS. The Doctor states that the TARDIS is it's deteriorated, and she's about to basically reset it. And the TARDIS is going to basically become disactivated for a few minutes. But that's okay, because she's going to land them on a nice beach planet, only to reveal that when they reset the TARDIS, by the way, absolutely gorgeous scene, they changed the hues and saturations on when they're in the TARDIS zones this time, to give it a much more decaying feel. Looks really cool. And then when they actually run as the wall basically collides in on itself, really cool stuff. But when they get out, they find themselves in elf storage, and they see that the TARDIS's exterior, actually I can show you a picture because it's on the cover, has all of these cracks around it. And it actually sounds the cloister bells, the sound of impending doom, which I also believe also appeared in Flux, but I didn't mention it because there was so much to talk about in that story. And the Doctor, Yaz and Dan go around, they find Nick's body, see that he was killed by a Dalek, and then they go upstairs where they find Sarah's body killed by a Dalek. A Dalek finds them, and this is a special unit Dalek, a Dalek that was made for a specific purpose, to go out and particularly kill the Doctor. As such, the sonic screwdriver blocking their weapons doesn't work, and the Dalek kills our main characters before the opening credits. It just shoots all three of them. And, like, the Daleks have already won before the opening credits. By the way, this is also the longest cold opener, a scene that takes place before the opening credits, in the show's history, beating the previous record holder, The Return of Dr. Mysterio. So that's some really cool stuff. And it really actually helps this story. It does take a little bit of while before we, like I said, gets into the actual intro of the story. However, it treats this first part as basically the first time loop in this narrative, as when we come back to the story, most of our characters are fine and seemingly reset to just before they died, with Sarah and Nick basically reintroducing themselves like they did at the start of the night. I mean, they know each other, but like they were like, whoa, that was weird. I just had this strange like deja vu where we were killed and stuff. And then the Doctor, Dan and Yaz run out of the TARDIS only to be like, hold on, we've done this before, haven't we not? So they keep trying to chase up to Sarah and Nick. They don't find Nick alive, but they find Sarah. And later on they find Nick alive as well, after they keep getting killed. And that's essentially the premise of the story, that our characters, they keep getting killed by Daleks in this time loop. But there is a catch. There is a ticking clock, shall we say. Every time they get killed, every time the time loop resets, it's actually set a minute after the previous one. They are set in the same place. So the Doctor, Yaz and Dan always reappear just outside the TARDIS. Sarah and... That's strange, because Sarah and Nick reset in the like the opening where you go in when you open the building, but then like later on Nick kind of just finds himself in the hallways. I don't know how that works, but that's a nitpick. And essentially every time it resets they lose a minute, and essentially when it leads up with the time that the time loop is supposed to end, the time loop will stop, and if the Daleks kill them by then, they have been dead. They will just die, like proper die. And that is some really unique storytelling. Usually in a Groundhog Day story, it's like a repeat of a particular moment, and our characters are useless. Not useless, but they're unable to change like the time limit, or unable to achieve anything until they've learned a particular lesson. And that is great, that is good. But what this story does is add in a sort of a timing clock, essentially, because our Daleks are coming on killing everybody, as basically the more times they kill them, the more likely that they're going to stay dead. It's not a case of the Daleks kill them, we reset, and we've still got we're fine now, we've got plenty of time to work things out. Like usually in Groundhog Days, it's like the fact that you have this abundant amount of time, which is usually a case in these Groundhog Day stories. In here, it actually isn't the case. you have this ticking clock, this time limit, and they only have basically a few tries before they get it right. So the characters basically try and plan, they try and work out. In one case, the Doctor's just like, right, the Daleks think they're going to go down because we constantly go down. Let's all make our way up. But Nick's down at the lower levels, while Sarah goes down to try and save him. Or at least in the second loop, she goes down, and Nick believes that she's gone to save him as he goes up to try and save Sarah, but they miss their passes. But later down in the time loop, Sarah actually does go back to try and save Nick. And it's like there's loads of valuable lessons here. And we also learn a lot of stuff. We learn essentially Nick, every time he comes down here in the elf storage, he's keeping stuff from his ex-partners. Essentially when he leaves somebody, and they forget something, or they've just abandoned something at his house, he basically puts it in the storage just in case it comes back, which doesn't sound odd on its front, but from an outsider's point of view, it does feel really odd, and the story does play with that. What this story really does well is character here. Sarah and Nick are such lovable characters. I was well aware of Ashley Beer's comedic values. I've seen her in a lot of stand-up performances prior to this, and when I heard that she was going to be in Doctor Who, I got really excited. I've not heard of Jerry Salmon before, but here he does a really great job, and you really feel this. You do feel bad for him, that he is basically in love with this woman who doesn't really see him apart from as a customer until the second half of the story, as well as he's doing this really strange, odd and uncomfortable thing when you think about it, but he's not doing it out of hatred. He's not doing it out of thing. He does it because he's just maybe too nice for his own good. And what's really great is that you can relate to both sides, because Sarah sees this and sees all this really strange storage stuff, and she's absolutely freaked out, and she's absolutely freaked out with these Daleks, which they seem like they have nothing to them to protect themselves, and she just they're just normal people. But Sarah has basically, she's stuck in working in this place, and that's metaphor of the story in it, to the trapping of your regular life is stopping you from having the life you want to. That's usually the moral of the stories of these stories. And certainly Sarah and Nick's basically got to learn to let go of the past. At one point he does get all of his stuff to use as a barricade for then a Dalek to just destroy it. Really great moment, really great. Really great. There's so many good scenes in this story. This story is so good. It's so good. One of my favourite moments, in fact, is basically all the plan goes a bit tits up. So the Doctor and Yaz really need to have a distraction. They need to make somebody to distract so they can basically have a time loop to figure out what's going on. And Dan decides that he's going to be the distraction. And then if he dies, he's just going to come back in the next time loop to make sure there's another time loop. And what he does is he grabs the book and he basically plays around with his Dalek, where it's just he pretends that he was one of the workers there. There's a running joke in this story where Daleks are I am not something. One of the characters actually asks him, is he Nick? To which one of the Daleks says, I am not Nick. I think it's Sarah when she first meets the Dalek, and the Dalek, she's distracted from her phone from him because her mother keeps ringing her. And Dalek says, I am not Nick. This is a joke to the fact that not only is it obviously not Nick, but the Daleks are voiced by Nicholas Briggs. So that is pretty cool. There's just so many little moments like this. And then when Dan confronts the Dalek, he pretends. And John Bishop, there's so many it does help that we have 3 professional comedians in this story, but this story is so funny. And what I think really works about this story for me, what really indulges me in this story is that, yes, it is funny. There's a lot of funny moments. Sarah, Nick, and Dan specifically are really funny characters, and Yaz and the Doctor do have their funny moments in the story. But it never distracts from the danger of the narrative. It doesn't distract from the danger of the Daleks. Whenever the Daleks appear, Anita, I might have been pronouncing her name before wrong, Anita Lofter, her directing really gives the Daleks a sense of presence, and the effect of them getting shot by the Daleks is so strong and so powerful. Reminds me a lot of Remembrance of the Daleks, where you just feel that hit, where you just feel that, like, whenever someone gets shot, it's like that oomph. But like, the Daleks do have jokes against them with the whole "I am not" something. It does get repetitive, but it doesn't distract from the danger that they present. That the Daleks here are essentially just a massive threat, and if they keep killing you long enough, you're going to stay dead. You're going to stay dead and buried, essentially. There's also one of my favourite scenes in this story, probably easily my favourite scene. It's essentially the Doctor's finally got everyone around together, and she comes up with a plan. Essentially have a fake time loop. Get out Daleks to learn little information about them, which will give them the wrong sense, the wrong idea. The Daleks will go around killing and exterminating these characters, but they will basically hint that they're not going to do anything, or at least they're not going to do the plan that they're going to do. And all our characters are kind of muffled, they're kind of distracted by us. There's so many ideas going around, and they're not really sure about the plan. But the Doctor gives this absolutely gorgeous speech about how it's what humans do. We try, we fail, we try again, we learn, we get friends, we get comfortable, we fail even more, we fail even harder with our friends. We try again with our friends, we get more friends, we get more company, we come up with a plan, and eventually we will exceed. And the way the Anita Lofter directs Jodie Whittaker, the way Jodie Whittaker plays that scene, I remember watching this for the first time, and I was absolutely entranced in this scene. It's so good. So many great moments here. Not to say that the story is all amazing. It does have a few hiccups. One thing in the story that is kind of distracting is that the Daleks do learn our characters' plan, or at least the general plans, and our characters do repeat certain elements to try and get to certain elements. For example, Sarah uses the lift at most of the loops. In one case, the Dalek shoots the electrical equipment for the elevator to stop, and the Dalek basically has her trapped, where then she has no choice but to open the shutter and let the Dalek kill her to reset the time loop. But the Daleks never do that after that point. There are other parts in the story where characters go in the elevator, specifically Sarah, and the Daleks just don't do that. That's the only one that can really come off at the top of my head. I'm sure if somebody else watched the story, they can give me other examples of that. But it's the time loop story. The main thing is our focus on our characters, and it worked really well. And even though, yes, it is a hindrance to the Daleks' plan anyway. Like I said, the way the Daleks are directed, the way that they're that first time it happens, and it's just right, there's no hope for Sarah in this time loop. She's going to die again. Really a sense of danger and urgency in this narrative. This story is really strong. The Doctor basically works out... Oh, I forgot to mention. Let's talk about why the Daleks are here. Because the Doctor finds out that there's this time loop, and she originally thinks that the Daleks created the time loop. But it turns out they didn't. They actually found themselves to break into the time loop First there was one, now there was two, then there was three. And they all find themselves like in the time loop for a purpose. The Doctor thinks that there is some sort of grand scheme, maybe there's something here. But no, these Daleks are specifically made to shoot the Doctor, and essentially the time loop was created by the destroying TARDIS. This is actually a sort of twist, which, on the grand scheme of things, doesn't actually change anything, because it's like, the Daleks make it out like they're going after the Doctor for their mass destruction in the story Flux, which, by the way, is the universe still standing? If you go by the narrative of Flux, everything but Earth is destroyed. How does that work? Doesn't make a lick of sense. But anyway, the Daleks go after the Doctor because of the mass destruction of Daleks in the story Flux, to which the Doctor points out quite clearly that out of all the things the Daleks can blame her for, that was mainly a Sontaran plan that she kind of just hijacked to also destroy the Sontarans. Like, the Daleks were going to get destroyed anyway. If anything, they should go after the Sontarans. But what I actually like about this is that it keeps this story mainly self-contained. There is that twist. There is a danger that the whole thing with the TARDIS being decaying, the whole thing about the Daleks coming here, could have been part of a grander scheme, a grander plan, which is I was worried about, especially when you consider that the destroying TARDIS was part of Flux, with the TARDIS being distorted, being warped. But here, essentially, is stated that the Doctor essentially came up, the Doctor, maybe by accident, or maybe the TARDIS just got damaged in a previous adventure. That's why it's happening. And the Doctor trying to fix it, put it in a very vulnerable state where it traps itself in a time loop with all of these other characters and stuff. And the Daleks have found a perfect opportunity to get in and kill the Doctor once and for all. It keeps the story mainly self-contained, and even though it's a twist which really, if you think about it on the grand scheme of things, has nothing of value. Like, in terms of like the Daleks come here to fight the Doctor. Like, yes, that's what Daleks do. You didn't need to state, like, you didn't need to have that spin on its head because of the whole Flux thing. But, like, it just keeps the story much more self-contained, and I really like that. Like, you thought, I was thinking, oh god, I'm going to tie this into a bigger storyline. Maybe the Flux is still around or something, hidden inside the TARDIS. But no, it's a self-contained story. Hooray! Thank you, Chris Criminal. Thank you. And so, in the last time, there's also the built-in relationship of Yaz, as we get some certain hints as Sarah and Nick basically start like having these feelings for each other developed throughout the story. There's one scene as well. Sorry, I'm rambling here, but there's one scene earlier on in the story where Sarah basically, she finds the whole thing freaky and weird, and she basically shouts this out to everybody. And what I really like this about the scene is that it feels very like real, where other characters point out like, that's a bit harsh, he's standing right there. And like, she's like, I don't care, it's all weird and it's getting destroyed by robots, and every character's just like, it's Daleks, they're not robots. And she's like freaking out and stuff, and she's being really harsh to him at the start of the story. And Nick, basically giving up on life, opens the shutter and tries to reason with the Dalek. It's like, okay, you can kill me, but let everyone else go. And the Dalek just kills him and doesn't care. And Sarah is just like, nobody would have done that, and nobody's been so kind to me like Nick, even if he is a bit strange. And he is a bit strange. I don't know. And then throughout the story, like, they develop and they start talking to each other. She admits that in the second loop, she didn't go to try and save him. She was going to find a weapon to kill the Dalek. But surely when she figured out that he was died, that he would come back to save him. But, like, there was, like, there's the dark development coming on. And that's important in this story because Yaz starts having issues, shall I say? She starts like staring at the Doctor a bit. She doesn't like answer all of her questions and stuff. And Dan sees this, and we learn in this story something that fans have been hinted at, have been wanting, so a particular kind of fan, should I say. And Dan basically confirms, confronting Yaz about it, that Yaz has feelings, romantic feelings for the Doctor. And the way it's executed in the story I really like. There's a great moment where Yaz starts breaking down. Mandip Gill is such a great actress. We don't give her enough credit. She starts crying and she's turning to Dan and she's like, I don't know what to do. I've been lying to everyone, including myself, which I think a lot of people could really relate to, especially if you do have these romantic to same-sex feelings. It's something that, like, a lot of people, like, it's confusing, it's muggled, and it's something that a lot of people, like, are ashamed of because of family and tradition and just overall culture. It's something that a lot of people try and hide, even, like, from themselves. They don't want to think about it. And at this point in the story, she can't hide it. I really like how it's just a small, like, beat in the story. It's just a moment that the story can kind of calm down, because surprisingly for a Groundhog Day story, the story is very fast paced. But Dan, Dan is just so lovable here, and Yaz is just like, you really just like feel really bad for her, really like connect with her. I am personally not a fan of this particular relationship. I don't think the Doctor, especially coming really late into the 13th Doctor era, I mean, by this point she's only got 2 stories left. But to introduce a romantic relationship between these 2 characters does feel really odd again, because there's only 2 episodes left. Also, I feel like, personally, I feel like the Doctor should only be, like, relationship-wise, only be really interest to River Song. I feel like I'm never a fan of when the companions fall in love with the Doctor. I was never a fan with Rose. I was never a fan with Martha, the subplot of Martha having feelings, and the whole thing with Amy Pond kind of having this like 2-way relationship between the Doctor and Rory and stuff. I've never been fans of these kind of storylines. I will say here though, it does get out some really great emotional beats with Yaz, who's struggling with this. She doesn't really want to admit it in front of anyone herself, which goes into the fact that, it did take her a while to us to learn about this. And the fact that Dan knew straight away, I absolutely love as well. To him, somebody who's struggled a lot, especially in relationships, but the way he does it, the way that he has to struggle is a little bit more simplified. So maybe from his point of view, he could just see it when somebody is struggling with relationship problems. It's also revealed the Doctor is in love with Yaz as well. This bit I kind of like, I don't know, because it's I don't understand, I don't know. Like I said, I only feel like the only time that this relationship thing works with the Doctor is with River Song, because they felt like they're more on the same footing. I always prefer when the companion is more Doctor being like a father or mother figure or a big sister figure, as the companion is the assistant or the child or the kid of the relationship between TARDIS, a companion, and Doctor. I personally prefer that. I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong in this portrayal. I just personally prefer it to be a much more platonic relationship, personally. But the story does do a great job at building this narrative thread into the narrative. And like I said, throughout Series 11 and Series 12 and Series 13, you get these kind of hints with Yaz that maybe like she's a bit shy, or maybe like there's something not quite. I don't know how to word this, but you get these small little bits, these small little moments, and this kind of reveals at least partially what's up with it. Maybe and it takes you away. The reason, not take you away, kablam, sorry. The reason she was so thirsty to get an adventure is because she knows that's what the Doctor will do, and she has this a massive appreciation for the Doctor, and that could be a part of it. I don't know, but essentially in the final, the Doctor realizes that like on the final loop they have one chance left because the Daleks keeps killing them, and they've only got one loop left. If they get killed in the last loop, they essentially stay dead, and the Doctor realizes if they find themselves outside the time loop, and they destroy the elf storage system. We get here of this character Jeff, who's storing all of this illegal stuff, all of this dangerous stuff in the building, which comes to their favour because there's fireworks in there. And essentially they're about to blow up the shelf storage with the Daleks in it as they escape. And they do. I think it's something like to do it like that, but there's this massive plan and there's this danger, and the Daleks surround them and they have to basically just run to the door. It's a very great action piece. Anita Lofter, like, Anita Lofter anyway, does no wrong in this story, and our characters escape as these fireworks explode, and they change their experience. Yaz feels more confident about her feelings for the Doctor, even though she might not admit it to the Doctor herself. And the Doctor has a much more understanding of what's going on, especially Dan is just like, she's got feelings for you and you got feelings for her, but you keep it to yourself. Why is that and stuff? And Nick and Sarah definitely come out of this story as completely different people. Even by the end of the story, that they are essentially a couple, and they go travelling together, decide to see the world. Bugger it, come on. And that's essentially Eve of the Daleks. Overall, after Flux, this was such a breath of fresh air. I absolutely love this story. It's probably one of my favourite 13th Doctor stories. Eve of the Daleks has so much going for it. Brilliant characters, brilliant plot, brilliant moments, brilliant dialogue, just so many great moments, so many great beats. It's not perfect, however. Sometimes the Daleks do silly things. Like I said, they destroy the electrical equipment for the elevator and then never do it again. But like overall, it's just so good. I just really love it. I don't know. Like I know a lot of people didn't like the story and would rather a much more story-heavy arc themed episode, like episodes in Flux. However, I personally prefer stories like this, more self-contained, where we get to learn a few characters. We get to like really get a feel for them, and they learn throughout the story, and we follow through them. It's a story which has basically gone right after that cluster muck of a story arc. We've decided to calm it down. We're just going to do this small little adventure in a time loop, in a storage facility. Have maybe one or two side characters, which yes, is because of the pandemic, but doesn't change the fact there's only two side characters in the story. And we're just going to focus on these 5 characters, or our 5 main characters. And that's it. You don't need to learn a massive storyline. You don't need to do like your homework before this episode. Just get introduced to these characters and just enjoy their company as they have to fight their way through this danger and learn experience. It's just, I don't know what it is. I just really enjoyed this episode. Eve of the Daleks is so good. So join me next time where we will go to the penultimate episode of the 13th Doctor era. She goes back to pirate times, meets a famous pirate warrior woman, and also encounters some old friends she hasn't met since the 80s. So join me next time for Legend of the Sea Devils. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!